Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Nutty Libertarian. Coming up, I update an earlier story I covered about the West Lake Landfill. Those of you who don't know what is happening at the West Lake Landfill, I am going to give you just a real quick high-level overview. If you want a more in-depth explanation, please refer to episode 4 where I cover these things in much greater detail. But suffice to say, West Lake Landfill is a giant effing disaster, okay? So here's the reason why. During the Manhattan Project, which if you recall was the program that the United States used to manufacture the atomic bombs that we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan during World War II. Okay, so the nuclear waste generated from that uranium production is buried all over densely populated St. Louis City and County. West Lake Landfill is just one of those dump sites. Okay, so the West Lake Landfill is divided into two sections. The north end of this section up here, the north end of the landfill up here, and the south end of the landfill down here. Okay? The north end of the landfill is where the nuclear waste from the Manhattan Project is buried. All right? Now, I'm not placing these logos over the exact spots where the waste has been proven to be. I'm just putting it up here to paint you a picture so that you can generally see how the players are lining up on the field. Okay, so north end of the landfill is radioactive, and keep in mind this landfill is unlined, it is uncapped, it is on a floodplain, and it is in densely populated St. Louis County. Okay, now the southern end of the landfill is an industrial chemical dump. Okay, so there are all sorts of industrial chemicals buried under this green tarp here. All right, and I'm going to put these fire logos down here. The reason why I'm putting fire logos down here is because the southern end of the landfill is on fire. Okay, there's an underground fire that has been raging here for years. I think it's 4, maybe 5, it might even be 6 years by now. And for whatever reason, whether we human beings lack the know-how or the funding or the will or the desire to put this fire out, it's not being put out. Okay, this is an EPA Superfund site, and basically the EPA is doing almost nothing to put this fire out. They're spending their time testing things and testing things and testing things, and while they're busy testing, the fire is busy doing what fires do. It's burning things, okay? See this picture here that I'm dragging up here? This is showing fire blowing from the landfill into nearby neighborhoods, not fire, smoke. It's showing smoke billowing out of this landfill into nearby neighborhoods. All right, so you can see for yourself what a giant disaster it probably would be to live next to this landfill. The biggest fear is that the fire and the radioactive waste will meet, if they have not met already, and blow smoke filled with radioactive contamination, also known as nuclear fallout, all over densely populated St. Louis County. Okay, now this is pretty much all the stretch of land that hypothetically separates the fire from the waste. So you can see how very little acreage separates this whole area from disaster. While the EPA is busy trying to convince everybody that there's nothing to fear from the West Lake Landfill, this lovely couple, Robin and Mike Daly, found radiation in the dust behind their kitchen refrigerator. So they had the dust from their refrigerator and other spots in their house tested by an independent Massachusetts lab, and they found the unique signature of highly concentrated uranium found in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the same uranium used to develop nuclear weapons in the Manhattan Project. Okay. Since my last update earlier this year, the EPA has been busy telling everybody that there is nothing to see or fear at the West Lake Landfill. Well, did you remember to check behind the refrigerator? In fact, they published this fancy update that says specifically, for particulate samples, the isotopic and gamma spectroscopy for uranium-238, thorium-230, and combined radium are below Nuclear Regulatory Commission limits for public exposure. Okay, so they're telling you here that, you know, it's not so bad. Really? Well, the Dailies found it behind the refrigerator. All right? They even put on webinars. That's right. The EPA uses taxpayer money to put on webinars. And here's a webinar that they gave on May 19th, 2016 about the West Lake Landfill. All right? And in here, they assure you here that gamma radiation rates continue to be indistinguishable from natural background.
And yet the dailies found it behind their refrigerator?
Also, gross alpha and gross beta radionuclides did not exceed occupational standards. Okay, and off-site air monitoring in Spanish Village, we'll come back to this Spanish Village thing, and elsewhere in 2014 and 2015 for these elements were 100 times lower than regulatory values of the US NRC.
Did you think to look behind the refrigerator?
Well, if scientists at the Department of Mediocrity, the EPA, had actually stopped to check the Journal of Environmental Radioactivity from 2 months prior to when they published that webinar, they would have seen that the evidence of off-site contamination is already there.
It's behind the... Never mind.
Okay, the science has been done. You don't need to spend taxpayer money to do it again. Okay? And the science concluded unsupported 210 lead and isotopic uranium and thorium were found in house dusts. An article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch gives Republic Services, the manager of the landfill, it gives their response. Their response is by Russ Nutty, Republic Services Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs. He says, for years, federal regulators, state officials, and third-party experts have been clear that the landfill is safe. There has been no evidence that supports a claim for off-site contamination. The landfill remains in a managed state.
Well, Russ, what are you managing? A cancer outbreak? That's going to do it for this episode of the Nutty Libertarian. I want to thank you for tuning in. If you would like to get more information on the West Lake Landfill yourself, please go to facebook.com and search out the group West Lake Landfill. Okay? Also, you can find them on the internet at stlradwastelegacy.com, as well as Twitter at justmomsstl. Okay? Until then, I'll see you next time.